The year is 1861. The United States, a young nation founded on principles of liberty and equality, finds itself on the brink of a devastating internal conflict, the Civil War. This brutal conflict, pitting brother against brother, state against state, would ultimately claim the lives of over 600,000 Americans and leave an indelible mark on the nation's soul. At the heart of this tumultuous period lay a fundamental question that had haunted the nation since its inception, the institution of slavery. The southern states, heavily reliant on slave labor for their agrarian economy, fiercely defended their right to maintain this system. The North, on the other hand, increasingly viewed slavery as a moral abomination, incompatible with the nation's founding ideals. This fundamental divide over slavery, coupled with simmering tensions over states' rights, westward expansion, and the very nature of the Union, created a tinderbox of resentment and mistrust. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a staunch opponent of slavery's expansion, in 1860, proved to be the spark that ignited this powder keg, leading to the secession of 11 southern states and the eruption of the bloodiest conflict in American history. At the core of the Civil War lay the deeply contentious issue of slavery. For generations, the southern states had built their economies and societies upon the backs of enslaved Africans, perpetuating a system of forced labor and racial subjugation. Cotton, the South's primary cash crop, was entirely dependent on slave labor, enriching plantation owners while condemning millions to a life of servitude. Abolitionists in the North, driven by moral outrage and a belief in the inherent equality of all people, vehemently denounced slavery as a barbaric institution, a stain on the nation's conscience. They organized campaigns, published newspapers, and staged daring rescues on the Underground Railroad, determined to dismantle this system of human bondage. The South, however, remained deeply entrenched in its defense of slavery, viewing it as an economic necessity, a social order ordained by God, and a fundamental right protected by the Constitution. They argued that the abolitionists' attacks on their way of life were a direct assault on their sovereignty and a threat to their very existence. This fundamental clash of values and ideologies created an unbridgeable gulf between the North and the South, fueling a growing sense of animosity and setting the stage for a violent confrontation. Beyond the moral dilemma of slavery, the Civil War also represented a clash over the very nature of the Union and the balance of power between the federal government and individual states. The southern states, fiercely protective of their autonomy and deeply suspicious of federal overreach, subscribed to the principle of states' rights. They argued that the Constitution granted individual states considerable sovereignty, including the right to determine their own laws and institutions, even if those laws and institutions contradicted federal mandates. This belief in states' rights extended to the issue of slavery, with Southern leaders asserting their absolute right to maintain this institution within their borders, free from outside interference. The North, on the other hand, increasingly embraced a nationalist vision of the Union, emphasizing the supremacy of the federal government in matters of national importance. They argued that the Constitution, while granting states certain rights, ultimately established a unified nation, indivisible and bound by the will of the majority. This fundamental disagreement over the nature of the Union and the balance of power between states and the federal government created a dangerous fault line in American politics, exacerbating tensions and pushing the nation closer to the brink. Section 4, Westward Expansion and the Question of Slavery. As the United States expanded westward in the mid-19th century, incorporating vast new territories into the Union, the question of slavery's expansion became increasingly contentious. The vast lands acquired through purchases like the Louisiana Purchase and the Mexican Cession presented a dilemma. Would these new territories be open to slavery, or would they be designated as free soil? The South, eager to expand its agricultural empire and maintain its political power within the Union, fought tirelessly to ensure that slavery would be permitted in these new territories. They argued that denying Southern slaveholders the right to transport their property to these new lands violated their constitutional rights and tipped the balance of power in favor of the North. The North, however, was equally determined to prevent the spread of slavery. They viewed westward expansion as an opportunity to establish free soil, where all men could enjoy the fruits of their labor without the stain of human bondage. They feared that allowing slavery to expand would solidify the South's grip on the nation's political and economic future. This battle over westward expansion and the future of slavery played out in Congress, in the courts, and ultimately on the battlefields of the Civil War, further deepening the divide between North and South. Section 5. Lincoln's election, a catalyst for secession. The election of Abraham Lincoln as the 16th President of the United States in 1860 proved to be the tipping point that plunged the nation into civil war. Lincoln, a member of the newly formed Republican Party, ran on a platform of preventing the expansion of slavery into the territories. Although Lincoln campaigned on a message of preserving the Union and made it clear that he would not interfere with slavery in states where it already existed, his election sent shockwaves through the South. Southern leaders viewed Lincoln's victory as a harbinger of things to come, a sign that their way of life, their very existence within the Union, was under threat. Fearing that Lincoln's administration would chip away at their rights and ultimately seek to abolish slavery altogether, 11 Southern states, led by South Carolina, seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. This act of secession, a direct challenge to the legitimacy of the federal government, marked the official beginning of the American Civil War. Section 6. The war's enduring legacy, shaping a nation. The American Civil War, a brutal conflict that raged for 4 years, left an indelible mark on the nation's psyche and forever altered American history. The war's legacy is complex, woven from threads of triumph and tragedy, progress and pain. The war resolved the question of slavery, ending centuries of human bondage and affirming equality for all Americans. It also reaffirmed the supremacy of the federal government, establishing the United States as an indivisible nation. The war's impact extended beyond the battlefield, ushering in profound social, political, and economic transformation. The abolition of slavery paved the way for civil rights and the eventual dismantling of Jim Crow segregation. The war's legacy continues to shape American identity and inspire debate to this day. Section 7. Conclusion: Reflections on a Divided Past. The American Civil War serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring power of ideas, the complexities of human nature, and the enduring struggle for freedom and equality. It is a story of division and unity, of loss and redemption, of a nation tested by fire and ultimately reforged in the crucible of war. As we reflect on this pivotal chapter in American history, we are reminded that the fight for justice and equality is an ongoing process, a torch passed down through generations. The Civil War, with all its complexities and contradictions, continues to challenge us to confront the unfinished business of our nation, to bridge the divides that still linger, and to strive for a more just and equitable society for all. The words of Abraham Lincoln, spoken in the aftermath of the war, continue to resonate with profound relevance today. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations.
The United States in 1861 was a nation deeply divided. At the heart of this division was the institution of slavery. For decades, the issue of slavery had been a source of intense debate and political maneuvering. The Southern states, with their economies heavily reliant on slave labor, fiercely defended its existence. They viewed any attempt to restrict or abolish slavery as a direct attack on their way of life. In contrast, the Northern states had become increasingly opposed to slavery on moral and economic grounds. Abolitionist movements gained momentum, demanding an end to what they saw as a barbaric and unjust system. The differences between the North and the South extended beyond slavery. They had different economic systems, social structures, and political ideologies. These differences created a chasm between the two regions, making compromise and reconciliation increasingly difficult. By the late 1850s, the fabric of the nation was stretched thin, threatening to unravel completely. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a staunch opponent of slavery's expansion, in 1860 proved to be the breaking point. Southern states saw Lincoln's victory as an existential threat, fearing that he would move to abolish slavery altogether. Secession, once unthinkable to many, now seemed like the only viable option for preserving their way of life. In December 1860, South Carolina took the fateful step of seceding from the Union, followed shortly by 6 other Southern states. The Confederate States of America was formed, setting the stage for a conflict that would test the very soul of a nation. As the Confederate States of America took shape, tension gripped the nation. One point of particular contention was Fort Sumter, a federal installation located in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. Manned by Union troops, Fort Sumter stood as a symbol of federal authority in the heart of the Confederacy. Confederate leaders viewed the fort's presence as an affront to their sovereignty and demanded its surrender. President Lincoln faced a difficult dilemma. Surrendering Fort Sumter would be seen as an act of appeasement, emboldening the Confederacy and potentially leading to the secession of more states. However, reinforcing the fort could provoke a military response from the Confederacy, igniting a war that Lincoln desperately wanted to avoid. After weeks of tense negotiations, Lincoln decided to resupply Fort Sumter, but not reinforce it. He informed the Confederate government of his intentions, hoping to avoid a violent confrontation. However, Confederate leaders saw this as a provocation and decided to act. On April 12, 1861, at 4:30 a.m., Confederate batteries opened fire on Fort Sumter, raining down a barrage of artillery shells on the fort. The bombardment continued for 34 hours, pounding the fort's brick walls and setting its interior ablaze. Outnumbered and outgunned, the Union garrison endured the relentless assault as best they could. The news of Fort Sumter's bombardment sent shockwaves through the North. The attack, unprovoked in the eyes of many Northerners, galvanized public opinion against the Confederacy. Outrage and indignation swept through the streets of northern cities as citizens demanded action against the Confederacy. President Lincoln, thrust into the role of wartime leader, responded with resolve. On April 15, 1861, he issued a proclamation calling for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion and preserve the Union. Across the North, men answered the call to arms, flocking to enlist in the Union Army. The attack on Fort Sumter had awakened a sleeping giant. What had begun as a sectional crisis had now escalated into a full-blown civil war. The Confederate attack on Fort Sumter marked the beginning of a conflict that would claim the lives of over 600,000 Americans and leave an indelible mark on the nation's psyche. The war that began at Fort Sumter would not only determine the fate of slavery, but also shape the future of the United States, testing the very principles of democracy and the meaning of freedom. Section 4. The Confederacy's Gamble. A calculated risk. From the Confederacy's perspective, the decision to fire on Fort Sumter was a calculated risk. Confederate leaders, emboldened by their recent secession and eager to assert their independence, believed that a decisive military victory would solidify their position and deter any potential Union response. They underestimated the resolve of the North and the strength of the Union's commitment to preserving the nation. The Confederacy's strategy was based in part on the belief that the North, with its focus on commerce and industry, lacked the stomach for a protracted and bloody conflict. They also assumed that European powers, heavily reliant on Southern cotton, would intervene on their behalf, eager to maintain access to this vital resource. However, the Confederacy's gamble backfired. Instead of intimidating the North, the attack on Fort Sumter ignited a wave of patriotism and determination to preserve the Union. Section 5. International Repercussions. A World Watching. The outbreak of the American Civil War sent ripples across the Atlantic, capturing the attention of European powers. Great Britain, France, and other European nations watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern as the conflict unfolded. The Confederacy, hoping to gain international recognition and support, dispatched emissaries to European capitals, seeking to forge alliances and secure diplomatic recognition. They argued that the Confederacy was fighting for self-determination and the right to govern its own affairs. However, European powers, while sympathetic to some of the Confederacy's arguments, were hesitant to intervene directly in the conflict. Public opinion in Europe, particularly in Great Britain, was divided on the issue of slavery, and many European leaders were wary of aligning themselves with a nation that condoned its practice. Section 6. The Gathering Storm. Armies on the move. In the aftermath of Fort Sumter's fall, both the Union and the Confederacy mobilized their forces for war. Across the North and the South, men answered the call to arms, leaving behind their farms, families, and livelihoods to join the ranks. Armies swelled in size as volunteers poured into training camps, eager to defend their respective causes. The Union, with its larger population and industrial base, had a distinct advantage in terms of manpower and resources. Northern factories churned out weapons, ammunition, and supplies for the Union Army, while newly built railroads transported troops and equipment to the front lines. The Confederacy, while lacking the industrial might of the North, had a strong military tradition and a population deeply committed to the cause. Southern men, accustomed to riding horses and handling firearms, formed the backbone of the Confederate Army, while skilled military leaders like Robert E. Lee emerged to command its forces. Section 7. A Nation at War. The unraveling begins. As the summer of 1861 wore on, the armies of the North and the South clashed in a series of early battles that hinted at the long and bloody conflict to come. The First Battle of Bull Run, fought on July 21, 1861, near Manassas, Virginia, shattered the illusion of a quick and decisive Union victory. The Confederate Army, led by General P.G.T. Beauregard, routed the Union forces under General Irvin McDowell, sending shockwaves through the North. The Battle of Bull Run exposed the inadequacies of both armies and served as a sobering reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. The attack on Fort Sumter had unleashed forces that would transform the nation forever. The United States, once a beacon of unity and democracy, was now locked in a bitter civil war, its future uncertain. The conflict would test the limits of human endurance, challenge deeply held beliefs, and leave an indelible mark on the American landscape.
The American Civil War was a brutal conflict that tore the nation apart, leaving deep scars that would take generations to heal. From 1861 to 1865, the United States grappled with the divisive issue of slavery and its implications for the future of the nation. This period was marked by intense battles, significant losses, and profound changes. The war pitted brother against brother, father against son, as the nation fractured along ideological lines. Families were torn apart, and communities were divided, creating a legacy of pain and division. On one side stood the Union, comprising the northern states that sought to preserve the nation and abolish slavery. Led by President Abraham Lincoln, the Union fought for a unified country and the end of human bondage. On the other side stood the Confederacy, composed of southern states determined to secede and maintain the institution of slavery. Under the leadership of Jefferson Davis, the Confederacy fought fiercely for their way of life and independence. This conflict was not merely a political disagreement, but a fundamental clash of values and visions for the future of the United States. It was a battle over the very soul of the nation and what it stood for. The outcome of the Civil War would determine whether the nation would remain united or be torn asunder, and whether slavery would continue to stain the fabric of American society. The war's end marked a new beginning, but the wounds it left behind would take years to mend. At the helm of the Union Army stood Ulysses S. Grant, a resolute and determined leader who would become one of the most celebrated figures in American history. Grant, a West Point graduate with a strategic mind and a wealth of military experience, emerged as a beacon of hope for the Union during its darkest hours. Grant's primary objective was clear: to preserve the Union at all costs, a mission he pursued with unwavering dedication and relentless energy. He understood that the very survival of the United States as a single, unified nation was at stake, and that failure was not an option. To achieve this goal, Grant recognized the need to defeat the Confederacy militarily and bring the seceded states back into the fold, restoring the nation to its former glory. Unlike some of his predecessors, Grant was not afraid to engage the enemy in aggressive campaigns, understanding that bold actions were necessary to secure victory. He believed that relentless pressure on the Confederacy was essential to crushing their rebellion and ensuring a swift end to the conflict. Grant's unwavering determination and strategic brilliance proved crucial in turning the tide of the war in favor of the Union, ultimately leading to the preservation of the United States. Leading the Confederate Army was Robert E. Lee, a brilliant military strategist revered for his tactical genius. Lee, a graduate of West Point and a veteran of the Mexican-American War, was a formidable opponent. Lee's objective was to secure the independence of the Confederacy. He aimed to defend the South's right to self-determination and preserve its way of life, which was deeply intertwined with the institution of slavery. Despite facing a larger and better equipped Union Army, Lee inflicted heavy casualties on the Union forces in numerous battles. His tactical brilliance and the unwavering courage of his soldiers allowed the Confederacy to hold on far longer than many had anticipated. Section 4. The Clash of Ideologies and Strategies. The Civil War was a clash not just of armies, but also of ideologies and strategies. The Union, with its larger population and industrial capacity, pursued a strategy of attrition. Grant's relentless campaigns aimed to wear down the Confederate forces, disrupt their supply lines, and demoralize their population. The Union blockade of southern ports further crippled the Confederacy's ability to wage war. The Confederacy, on the other hand, adopted a defensive strategy. Lee aimed to inflict heavy casualties on the Union Army, hoping to erode their will to fight and force them to negotiate a peace settlement that recognized the Confederacy's independence. Section 5. Grant and Lee. A study in contrasts. Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee, though adversaries on the battlefield, were both skilled military leaders. However, their backgrounds, personalities, and approaches to leadership differed significantly. Grant, the son of a tanner, hailed from humble beginnings. He was known for his tenacity, his willingness to take risks, and his unwavering belief in the Union cause. Lee, scion of a prominent Virginia family, exuded an air of Southern aristocracy. He was admired for his tactical brilliance, his gentlemanly conduct, and his devotion to the Confederacy. Despite their contrasting styles, both Grant and Lee left an indelible mark on the course of the Civil War. Section 6. The Enduring Legacy of the Civil War. The American Civil War was a defining moment in the nation's history. It ended slavery, preserved the Union, and transformed the United States into a truly united nation. The war's impact was profound and far-reaching. The war's legacy continues to shape American society today, influencing our culture, politics, and social fabric, serving as a reminder of the fragility of democracy and the constant need to protect it. It underscores the importance of unity and equality, values that are still being fought for in various forms. The stories of Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee, two iconic figures who embodied the complexities of this pivotal conflict, continue to fascinate and inspire generations of Americans. Their leadership, their strategies, and their personal convictions continue to be studied and admired. Their unwavering commitment to their respective causes serves as a testament to the human capacity for both good and evil, for both unity and division. The battlefields and memorials stand as silent witnesses to the sacrifices made and the lessons learned from this tumultuous period in history. The Civil War, though a tragic chapter in American history, ultimately paved the way for a stronger, more unified, and more just nation. Its enduring legacy is a testament to the resilience and enduring spirit of the American people.
Welcome to Part 4, Key Battles and Events of the Civil War. The year is 1862. Already the nation has been divided by a terrible conflict, brother against brother, a fight to preserve the Union against those who would see it torn asunder. In this video, we'll explore 5 pivotal moments that shaped the course of the war. From the blood-soaked fields of Antietam to the quiet surrender at Appomattox courthouse, we will bear witness to the bravery, the sacrifice, and the enduring legacy of this tumultuous period in American history. Let us journey back to those fateful days to understand the events that shaped a nation and forever altered the course of its destiny. A dawn broke over Sharpsburg, Maryland on September 17, 1862. The air, heavy with dew, carried a sinister premonition. It was to be a day etched in infamy, a day where the earth ran red with the blood of countrymen. The Battle of Antietam, the single bloodiest day in American military history, was about to unfold. General George McClellan's Army of the Potomac faced off against General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. The stakes were high for both sides. Lee, emboldened by recent victories, sought to carry the war into the North. McClellan, under immense pressure to deliver a Union victory, saw an opportunity to crush the Confederate advance. The battle raged across fields of corn, over stone walls, and around a small whitewashed church known as the Dunker Church. Wave after wave of men were cut down by relentless rifle fire and devastating artillery barrages. The cornfield, a seemingly peaceful expanse, became a scene of unimaginable carnage. By day's end, the fields around Antietam lay littered with over 23,000 casualties. Though tactically a draw, Antietam proved a strategic victory for the Union. More importantly, Antietam provided President Lincoln the opportunity he needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, forever linking the war with the cause of freedom. The Emancipation Proclamation, issued on January 1, 1863, stands as a beacon of hope in the long, dark night of slavery. With a stroke of his pen, President Lincoln transformed the Civil War from a struggle to preserve the Union into a fight for the liberation of millions. The document itself was carefully worded. It declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are and henceforward shall be free. This careful phrasing, while strategically excluding slaveholding border states loyal to the Union, sent a powerful message both domestically and abroad. The Emancipation Proclamation was a watershed moment in American history. It redefined the war's purpose, elevating it to a moral crusade against the institution of slavery. News of the proclamation spread slowly, reaching enslaved communities through whispered conversations and clandestine readings. For many, it ignited a flicker of hope in the face of unimaginable hardship. The proclamation also had profound international implications. It effectively ended any chance of European intervention on behalf of the Confederacy. The road to true emancipation would be long and arduous, paved with the sacrifices of countless individuals who fought for a more just and equitable nation. But with the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation, the course of American history had irrevocably changed. The small town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, became forever synonymous with sacrifice and valor. It was here, in the first 3 days of July 1863, that the fate of the Confederacy hung precariously in the balance. The Battle of Gettysburg, a clash of over 160,000 soldiers, was a pivotal turning point in the Civil War. It marked the Confederacy's high watermark, the furthest northward advance of Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. The battle began almost by accident, a chance encounter between Confederate troops searching for shoes and Union cavalrymen. What started as a skirmish escalated into a ferocious struggle for control of key terrain. On the second day, the fighting raged with renewed intensity. Little Round Top, a seemingly insignificant hill, became a focal point of the Confederate assault. Of the 20th Maine Volunteer Infantry Regiment, under the command of Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, made a desperate stand, their valiant defense securing the Union left flank. The third day witnessed the infamous Pickett's Charge, a desperate gamble by Lee to break the Union center. Over 12,000 Confederate soldiers advanced across open fields, met by a storm of Union artillery and rifle fire. The charge was repulsed, leaving the Confederate army shattered and demoralized. Lee, defeated, began his retreat back to Virginia. The Battle of Gettysburg ended with over 50,000 casualties, a staggering loss of life that left an indelible mark on the nation's psyche. In November of that year, President Lincoln delivered his now iconic Gettysburg Address, consecrating the battlefield as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. In the annals of warfare, few campaigns are as audacious or as controversial as General William T. Sherman's March to the Sea. Beginning in November 1864, Sherman led his army of 60,000 men on a devastating march through the heart of Georgia, cutting a swathe of destruction 60 miles wide and 300 miles long. Sherman's objective was twofold: to cripple the Confederacy's ability to wage war and to break the South's will to fight. His strategy, known as hard war, targeted not only military objectives but also the civilian infrastructure that sustained the Confederate war effort. Sherman's troops, operating under a policy of foraging, seized food and supplies from the local population, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. Railroads were destroyed, bridges burned, and fields laid waste. The Confederacy's industrial and agricultural capacity was dealt a crippling blow. The march was not without its critics. Some condemned it as unnecessarily brutal, arguing that it inflicted undue suffering on Southern civilians. For the Confederacy, already reeling from defeats on other fronts, Sherman's march to the sea was a devastating blow. It shattered the South's morale, exposed the hollowness of its defenses, and hastened the war's end. While the debate over its necessity and morality continues, there is no denying the profound impact it had on the outcome of the Civil War. Sherman's march to the sea broke the back of the Confederacy, paving the way for the Union's eventual victory. The spring of 1865 arrived with a sense of both relief and profound sadness. The long, bloody conflict that had torn the nation apart was drawing to a close. The Confederate army, battered and depleted, was on the verge of collapse. On April 9, 1865, in the small village of Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army of Northern Virginia to Union General Ulysses S. Grant. The terms of surrender dictated by Grant were surprisingly generous. Grant, recognizing the significance of the moment and seeking to heal the wounds of war, allowed Confederate officers to keep their sidearms and permitted soldiers to return home with their horses and mules. There would be no mass trials for treason, no retribution exacted upon the defeated foe. The meeting between Lee and Grant, once bitter adversaries, was marked by a sense of solemnity and respect. As Lee rode away from the McLean House, where the surrender took place, Union soldiers began to cheer. Grant, however, silenced them, ordering that the defeated Confederates be treated with dignity. News of Lee's surrender spread quickly, sparking celebrations in the North and a mixture of relief and despair in the South. The Confederacy, though its demise was inevitable, clung to a flicker of hope that had been extinguished at Appomattox. The surrender at Appomattox Courthouse marked the end of the Civil War, but it did not erase the deep divisions that had fueled the conflict. The process of reconciliation and reconstruction would be long and arduous, fraught with challenges and setbacks. Yet, in that quiet Virginia village, a glimmer of hope emerged from the ashes of war. The legacy of Appomattox is a testament to the power of forgiveness and the enduring hope for unity in the face of adversity. Thank you for watching Part 4, Key Battles and Events of the Civil War. We have journeyed through some of the most harrowing yet defining moments in American history, bearing witness to the sacrifices made to preserve a nation. Stay tuned for more in-depth explorations of this pivotal period in American history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more historical content. Let us never forget the lessons learned and the lives lost, striving always to build a more just and equitable future for all. The American Civil War, a brutal and bloody conflict, forever changed the United States. It was a war that pitted brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, and tested the very core of the nation's identity. The battles were fierce, the casualties immense, and the emotional toll on the country was profound. It tested the very fabric of the nation, revealing deep divisions over slavery and the meaning of freedom. Families were torn apart, communities divided, and the nation was plunged into a state of turmoil. The debates over slavery were not just political but deeply personal, affecting the lives of millions. From the ashes of this devastating war, a stronger and more unified nation emerged. The process of rebuilding was arduous, but it was also a time of great hope and renewal. Towns and cities that had been ravaged by war began to rebuild, and the American flag, a symbol of unity and resilience, waved proudly once more. The federal government, once viewed as weak and subservient to states' rights, emerged from the conflict with a newfound sense of authority and purpose. President Abraham Lincoln, with his steadfast leadership, played a crucial role in redefining the power dynamics between the federal government and the states. The war demanded unprecedented national mobilization, leading to the expansion of federal powers. Recruitment posters called men to arms, and military camps sprang up across the nation. The scale of the conflict required a level of organization and coordination that had never been seen before. The creation of a national currency was a significant step in unifying the nation's economy. Before the war, various states and banks issued their own currencies, leading to confusion and instability. The introduction of a standardized currency helped to stabilize the economy and facilitate trade. The establishment of the Internal Revenue Service was another critical development. To fund the war effort, the government needed a reliable source of revenue, leading to the creation of the IRS. This institution would go on to play a vital role in the nation's financial system, and the expansion of the federal bureaucracy are just a few examples. The war necessitated the creation of new government offices and agencies to manage the war effort and its aftermath. This expansion laid the groundwork for the modern federal government. These changes, born out of necessity during wartime, had a profound and lasting impact on the relationship between the federal government and the states. The balance of power shifted, with the federal government taking on a more prominent role in national affairs. The Civil War was in essence a struggle over the very soul of America. It was a battle to define what the nation stood for and what it would become. The soldiers who fought on the battlefields were not just fighting for territory, but for the ideals that would shape the future of the country. Would it be a nation where slavery was tolerated, or would it embrace the ideals of liberty and equality for all? The Emancipation Proclamation, signed by President Lincoln, was a turning point in this struggle. It declared the freedom of all slaves in Confederate-held territory and set the stage for the eventual abolition of slavery. The answer to this question would determine the course of the nation's future. The Civil War, with all its horrors and sacrifices, ultimately led to a new birth of freedom. The nation emerged from the conflict with a renewed commitment to the principles of liberty and justice for all, setting the stage for future generations to continue the work of building a more perfect union. The victory of the Union over the Confederacy marked a turning point in American history. This monumental triumph was not just a military success, but a profound statement about the future direction of the nation. The Union's perseverance and ultimate victory ensured that the United States would remain a single unified country, setting the stage for a new era of growth and development. It reaffirmed the indivisibility of the nation and established the supremacy of the federal government over states' rights. This was a critical moment in the evolution of American governance, as it clarified the balance of power between the federal government and the states. The debates and conflicts over states' rights had long been a source of tension, but the Union's victory provided a definitive answer, ensuring a stronger, more cohesive national government. The idea of secession, once a potent threat to national unity, was decisively defeated. The surrender of the Confederate forces symbolized the end of a divisive chapter in American history. The notion that states could unilaterally leave the Union was put to rest, reinforcing the idea that the United States was a permanent and indivisible entity. This newfound sense of national unity had profound implications for the future of the United States. Families that had been torn apart by the war were reunited, and communities began to heal. The collective spirit of the nation was rejuvenated, and there was a renewed sense of purpose and optimism about what the future could hold. With the divisive issue of slavery settled, the nation could now turn its attention to other pressing matters such as westward expansion, industrialization, and the integration of newly freed African Americans into society. The end of slavery was a monumental step forward, but it also presented new challenges and opportunities for the nation to address, and its role on the world stage. The United States began to emerge as a significant player in international affairs, engaging in diplomacy and trade with other nations. The country's expanding influence was a testament to its growing power and ambition. The solidified Union provided a stable foundation upon which the nation could grow and prosper. The post-war period saw a surge in economic activity and innovation. Towns and cities were rebuilt, and new infrastructure projects such as the construction of railroads connected the country like never before. This era of reconstruction and growth laid the groundwork for the United States to become an industrial powerhouse. The preservation of the Union was not only a victory for the North, but a triumph for the principles upon which the nation was founded. President Abraham Lincoln's leadership and vision were instrumental in guiding the country through its darkest hours. His speeches and actions during the war inspired a sense of hope and determination that resonated with people across the nation. It reaffirmed the ideals of liberty, equality, and democracy that were enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. The Civil War and its aftermath were a testament to the enduring strength of these principles. The struggle for civil rights and equality continued, but the foundation laid during this period provided a beacon of hope for future generations and democracy that were enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. The post-war era saw significant advancements in the democratic process, with more citizens participating in the political system. The diverse fabric of American society began to be more fully recognized and celebrated, paving the way for a more inclusive and just nation. The American flag, waving proudly, symbolized the enduring spirit of a nation committed to the ideals of freedom and equality for all. The unified United States that emerged from the Civil War was a nation transformed. It had proven its resilience, its determination, and its unwavering commitment to its founding principles. This newfound strength and unity paved the way for the United States to assume a more prominent role on the world stage. With a strong central government, abundant resources, and a rapidly growing population, the United States was poised to become a major industrial and military power. The war itself had spurred technological innovation and industrial growth, laying the groundwork for the nation's economic dominance in the decades to come. The Civil War, though undeniably tragic, had inadvertently set the stage for the rise of the United States as a global power. It had tempered the nation in the fires of conflict, forging a stronger and more unified republic. Section 4. The Price of Unity. Scars of a Nation. The unification of the United States after the Civil War came at a tremendous cost. Over 620,000 soldiers perished in the conflict, leaving countless families shattered and communities devastated. The physical and emotional scars of the war lingered long after the guns fell silent. Reconstruction, the period following the war, aimed at rebuilding the South and integrating formerly enslaved people into society, proved to be a complex and tumultuous process. The legacy of slavery cast a long shadow over the nation, and the struggle for true equality for African Americans continued for generations. The Civil War, despite its ultimate outcome, served as a stark reminder of the fragility of democracy and the ever-present danger of division and discord within a nation. Section 5. A New Birth of Freedom, Redefining America. The phrase "a new birth of freedom" was famously coined by President Abraham Lincoln during his Gettysburg Address, a speech that has since become a cornerstone of American history. The Civil War, for all its horrors, brought about a profound transformation in American society. It was a conflict that pitted brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, and left an indelible mark on the nation's collective memory. The war's devastation was immense, but it also set the stage for a new era of American life. It led to the abolition of slavery, enshrined in the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. This amendment was a monumental step forward, legally ending the practice of slavery and promising freedom to millions who had been held in bondage. The abolition of slavery was not just a legal change, it was a seismic shift in the social fabric of the nation. This momentous act represented a new birth of freedom for millions of African Americans who had endured centuries of bondage. The joy and relief felt by those who were freed cannot be overstated. Emancipation opened the door to new opportunities, allowing African Americans to reunite with family members, seek education, and build communities. The war also redefined the meaning of citizenship and equality in the United States. It challenged the nation to reconsider who was entitled to the rights and privileges of citizenship. The concept of equality began to take on a broader, more inclusive meaning, laying the groundwork for future civil rights movements. The 14th and 15th Amendments, adopted during the Reconstruction era, granted citizenship and voting rights to African Americans, at least in principle. These amendments were crucial in redefining the legal landscape of the nation. The 14th Amendment guaranteed equal protection under the law, while the 15th Amendment aimed to protect the voting rights of African American men. These amendments, though often undermined in practice, represented a significant step towards fulfilling the promise of equality for all Americans. Despite the resistance and setbacks, these legal changes provided a foundation upon which future generations could build. The struggle for true equality would continue, but the groundwork had been laid. The Civil War forced the nation to confront its own hypocrisy and to strive to live up to its ideals of liberty and justice for all. It was a painful but necessary reckoning, one that would shape the course of American history for generations to come. The legacy of the Civil War is a testament to the enduring struggle for freedom and equality, a struggle that continues to this day. Section 6. The Enduring Legacy, Equality for All. The legacy of the Civil War continues to shape the United States today. The struggle for civil rights and equality, ignited by the war and fueled by the sacrifices of so many, continues to inspire generations of Americans to fight for a more just and equitable society. The ideals of freedom, equality, and democracy, tested on the battlefields of the Civil War, remain cornerstones of American identity. They serve as a beacon of hope, not only for Americans, but for people all over the world who yearn for a more just and equitable world. The Civil War reminds us that the pursuit of liberty and equality is an ongoing process, one that demands constant vigilance and unwavering commitment from each generation.